Welcome to From Embers to Excellence, a podcast that explores the many facets of leadership from the perspectives of some amazing people. We discuss the triumphs and failures that have shaped our lives and our leadership philosophies. It isn't whether we fail that defines us, but when we do fail, how do we respond? Leaders dust off the ashes and use their failures as fuel to work harder and as lessons to come back wiser and stronger, more resilient, more determined, and more committed to excellence. And now, here is your host, Dave Hollenbach.
Today's guest is Garrett Wienckowski. He is a veteran of Orange County Fire Rescue. He currently serves as a battalion chief. You were hired in 1998, April of 1998, so you've got essentially 22 years on. Mm-hmm. And you serve as the team leader for Task Force 4, the urban search and rescue team in Central Florida. It's a state asset, a regional asset. Right now, what that means, you've got, you're the team leader, so you're managing groups from Seminole County Fire Rescue, Osceola County Fire Rescue, Orange County Fire Rescue, City of Orlando. But Osceola County, St. Cloud, Kissimmee, they all have people that are on the team, but they don't necessarily represent one of the big three that make up the team, correct?
Right. Yeah, we've got about 100 and between 120 and 130 members on the team, made up from about 10 different departments. The big three are the Orange County, Seminole County, and Orlando. I'm Orange County's task force leader. We have a task force leader from each department. So we have a 3-platoon rotation. So we just rotate between the three of us who goes as the actual task force leader. And it works out pretty well. We've got members from Claremont, Lake County, Kissimmee, Martin County. I think we have one from St. Cloud. I think we have one from Melbourne. So a little bit here and there.
And how long have you been a part of Task Force 4?
I was one of the original members back in 2003 when we started. They increased after Hurricane Andrew was when pretty much the whole USAR team thing started. They created all the federal teams, and I think we've got 28 federal teams right now. 2 of them are in South Florida, Miami and Miami-Dade. And then we've got 6 other teams in the state of Florida that are state teams. And as far as it's concerned, in the state of Florida, Miami and Miami-Dade are considered state teams first, if it happens in the state of Florida.
And after 9/11, there was quite a bit of funding.
Yeah, and 9/11 is what really opened the door for all the state teams. So they recognized the need for that, and then they started putting everything together and started getting lots of grant money between the state Homeland Security and Urban Area Initiative. Those 2 grants pretty much funded all the USAR teams.
What I've seen from Orange County is sort of a direct pathway from special operations onto the USAR team. You've been involved with special ops. Was it probably right around the same time that that you went into special ops?
Yeah, when I was actually on duty on 9/11, and they put our squad 4 in service that day, just in response to that. And originally that was just a manpower unit, and then when they started to train everybody to the technician level, I transferred over to that station 83 that it was at, and got all the training, and they finally teched that truck out.
Across the United States, typically a squad is like a manpower unit, but in Central Florida, a squad is specialty unit. The city of Orlando, they've got a heavy rescue, and that's essentially what Squad 1, 3,
Yeah,
and
they have
4
different
is.
names for it. It's, the heavy rescue. I've heard them called heavy squads. Uh, you know, pretty much special operations does pretty much the same thing around the country. The one thing that kind of sets us apart from a lot of the other heavy rescues and heavy squads and whatever in the country is we also do hazmat in addition to all the other technical rescue disciplines. So, we're kind of a jack of all trades kind of a thing, where a lot of other departments, they separate hazmat from the technical rescue side.
In special operations in Orange County, it used to be all the squad technicians were public safety rescue divers, and I don't remember the year that the dive team was disbanded, but it was reformed in the last 5-6 years, and now it's more of a county-wide type of deployment model rather than just divers on the 3 units.
Yeah, I think we have like 171 divers.
And I know that quite a few of the squad technicians are divers, so just however the units are dispatched on a particular call. But can you talk a little bit about the qualifications or the training that goes into becoming a squad technician in Orange County?
You've got to have 2 years on the department. I think we lowered that a little bit. It used to be 3. A lot of the times, other departments, you usually get your most senior people on those trucks, which is the case with us as well at some point, because it's very cyclical. One of the things that you have is the people on these units are pretty motivated. So we usually get a lot of promotions out of our program. So we have a hard time actually keeping firefighters, on the squad, just because they're aggressive and they do want to get promoted. So that's, we try and get to the recruits early, say, hey, if you want to go to, a lot of the really cool stuff and go to and do a bunch of training, do training that nobody else gets to do, then, this is right up your alley. So we hit them early, and their first couple years in the department now, they got a lot to do because our department requires you become a paramedic in 3 years. So where we used to start preparing, new hires for, taking special ops classes for the truck companies and then eventually to the squad companies. Now they got to worry about doing their first year orientation stuff and then roll right into paramedic school, and then get precepted and become a paramedic within their first 3 years. So following that, now I always recommend that, if you have time in between any of that, knock a couple of these classes out. The 2 classes that I highly recommend to anybody in the fire service right off the bat, as far as special operations level technician classes, is vehicle machinery. I take the operations level and then the technician level, and because we do extrications. Besides hazmat, extrications are probably the second most technical rescue that we go to. So, but that's something that everybody in every fire department needs to know how to do. So I highly recommend that all firefighters go and get that one. And then rope rescues, the next one because not only are they useful as far as getting on truck companies and whatnot, but they're also pretty cheap compared to the other classes, like structural collapse and hazmat. Those are much longer and much more expensive. So recommend those 2 classes. And then, if you're lucky enough to be assigned to one of these special operation stations, the department will usually send you to these classes. If not, then you've got to get some of these on your own and show that, you kind of want to be in the program. So then you go take confined space, trench rescue, and then the last two everybody usually takes is the structural collapse and then the hazmat. So that's just the tech classes. That's just to get you qualified to even walk through the door to the program, because then you have to apply and get accepted into our squad academy that we do. So pretty much after you take all the classes, people can take these classes all over the place. So there is a different, you're learning the core, skills that you need for these classes. But in order to put everybody on the same page, we put on a squad academy at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, where we'll take, a whole bunch of firefighters mixed in with some engineers and lieutenants, but mostly firefighters. And then we'll run them through this 6-week academy and pretty much go over every single discipline that we do. We do 6 disciplines, the 6th one being hazmat. And then, we show them how we do it here in Orange County. And then the testing that follows that, it's grueling. It is, everybody that goes through it says it's the hardest thing that they've ever gone through in the fire service, as far as, because there's just so much information to retain. And we give, at the end, we do a testing process for that after the academy, where they have a written test, and then they also have a practical test on every single discipline. And they have to pass all of that in order to be checked off as squad qualified. And after they complete that and pass that, then we present them with our Eagle, our squad pin. So that it means a whole lot to people.
Do you have one? Do you have your pin that you could show?
No, it's on my uniform back at the station. It's an Eagle. It's it's got the hazmat and some of the disciplines on it. Very similar to the Navy SEALs Eagle, but it's modified. For us, we're not going to just take their stuff.
Yeah. I don't think I mentioned it. You've got your bachelor's degree from UCF in criminal justice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing at some point you wanted to be a cop.
Nope. No, I was going to school, I think originally for nursing. And my grades when my first couple semesters in college weren't as good as they should have been. And they actually, I had a friend at UCF that had a 4.0 that did not get into their nursing program. So I'm like, well, I'm not getting in with what I got. So I went looking for something else. But those classes really interested me. I just wanted to get a degree, do something. But I had no intentions on ever doing anything with that, because by the time I was going to UCF, I was already hired with the fire department.
So you were working full time in the fire department and going to school there?
Yep.
Cool. I believe it was 2012, 2013. You and I started collaborating, developing Orange County's leadership development program. Mm-hmm. It was you, Derek Alligood, myself, and a couple other people, but you and Derek were the primary go-to guys, the lead instructors for about as long as the program has been in existence. Can you talk a little bit about your personal leadership philosophy and how it came about that you've really developed as a leader, maybe some of your influences?
Well, you always have to work for a good array of people. Obviously, it helps when you work for really quality officers and leaders. But it also helps if you work for some that are not so good, because it also shows you what not to do and what doesn't work. So that's just as important as working for people that do a really good job and know their stuff and are good, solid leaders. You get a little bit of that diversity. It really, really helps. Myself, I never really thought it was a hard formula as far as being an officer. Is I just took everything that I ever liked about, all the lieutenants and chiefs that I've worked for. I took every quality that I really thought you should have, that I respected, because I asked myself, why do I follow this person? And I just took all of those characteristics and I tried to put it into my daily routine. Um, and so far it seems to work out pretty well for me. Now, don't get me wrong, I've had my ups and downs with it. We all make mistakes, and I've made plenty of them. But the important thing is that you learn from it, and you continue to improve yourself and learn and try and master your craft.
Now, your son recently got hired on with Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
I know that he was in the Marine Corps. How long was his enlistment?
He's been in 5 years. He's a reserve right now, so he's been in 5 years, and I think he's going to re-up and continue to be a reserve while he's in the fire department.
I've had a couple of conversations with him, and I can't recall what his education background is. Did he go into the Marine Corps right out of high school?
Yeah.
And then when he got out of the Marine Corps, he went to the Fire Academy and all that?
Yep.
And your advice to him, what was that like?
My advice to him was do what you love doing. He really didn't quite know. And, I'm not even the one that, I never pushed him into the fire service. He was around it. He loved the camaraderie. He loved pretty much everything that the Marine Corps gives you is the same kind of feeling and camaraderie that you get in the fire service. So it didn't surprise me that he was naturally attracted to the Marine Corps. It also helped that one of our family friends, who's also a personal trainer, was a career Marine, and he gave really good encouragement, and so he was a big influence on my son as well. But I wasn't the one that pushed him. When I let him decide that on his own. Just like trying to get him into the non-certified class at our department, he didn't really want to do that because he wanted to do everything on his own. So he went to fire standards on his own. I just stood back and let him do his thing, because I just knew that it would mean more to him if he did it on his own than if I helped.
So have you had any conversations with him? Has he talked to you about the special ops program? Or?
Oh yeah. He's already told me he wants to do what I did. But and I just told him, I'm like, I don't want you to be me. I want you to be you. You can still do that, but I want you to get out there and try all the stuff and see what you like. And if you still want to do special ops, then go for it. I want him, and he is his own person. I'm not telling him anything he doesn't know. But I'm very honored that he's working, and following in my footsteps. That means a lot to me. I'm very proud of him.
Let's put this in a certain scenario. Just say God forbid you were diagnosed with some kind of terminal illness, and you were in a position where you really needed to pass on as much as you could to him. What do you think the main thing you would stress to him would be?
Just be yourself. Don't try and be something that you're not. Always improve yourself every single day. Okay. One of the things that, I always tell the new hires, I insist on teaching the new hires leadership, just because I want them to have one good class that's from the heart and means something and is a really good, solid class. You know, and I always end the class telling them that be better than they were yesterday every day for the rest of their life. You know, and because I sat here and, you know, I think about that, and a day that you don't improve yourself is a wasted day. You know, this isn't an 8 to 5 job where you go in, you sit in a cubicle, you punch some computer keys, and then you go home. You don't think twice about your job. It is to some people. It has never been that way for me. You know, don't get me wrong. I really enjoy my time with my family, and I've learned to separate it a lot. But this is more than just a job. This is, you know, I don't want to sound cliche that it's a calling, but this is just something that, you know, this is just who I am. You know, it's just something that I've always enjoyed, and you know, it feels good. And at the, you know, at the end when my time is done, you know, I can look back on my life and my career, and, you know, for some people, I truly made a difference, and that's, you know, that's what's important.
So over the last few months, what's been your biggest obstacle to overcome, and, you know, how did you overcome it, or how are you approaching that obstacle?
I guess my most recent obstacle is just accepting the fact that the end of my career is coming, and you know, I've been a machine. I've worked a lot and done a lot, and now it's my biggest obstacle is trying to slow myself down and you know, prepare myself for the shock of leaving the fire service. Now I got some time before that happens, but you know, I have a short amount of time to pass on what I've learned, and, you know, and try and influence, you know, the future of the department as best as I can. You know, Lieutenant Alligood, you know, that I taught leadership with, the one thing that he always talked about to the class is giving back. You know, because, you know, I've had a really good career, and, you know, a lot of good training, a lot of good calls, and I've worked with the best people you could possibly work with. So, you know, I'm very fortunate, and I do want to give back and pass on the stuff that I've learned. So the next generation, you know, especially the special operations program, because, you know, I've been harping on everybody with me that we are short timers, and that the guys that gave us this program, you know, entrusted us with it, and we want to, you know, improve on it and make sure that it's better than when we got it for when we pass it.
One of the things that you said early on in the conversation kind of referenced mistakes, that sort of thing. What do you think, you know, and it's, if you're comfortable talking about it, maybe one of your biggest, I don't want to say failure, but well, maybe your biggest learning opportunity, and what lessons did you take from that experience, and you know, how did it shape who you are today?
Well, I've had quite a few learning experiences as I've gone along. You know, made some calls that, you know, I guess were the right calls in the end, but, you know, you still didn't feel like it. You know, and you got to deal with that kind of a stress as you go along. But you know, the one that truly defined, in my opinion, who I am as a leader and shaped me into, you know, what I am right now is, you know, it goes back to when we ended up having an axe on one of our rescues, and the station had an American flag and a Confederate flag painted on it. And that created a whole race thing. And, you know, it was in the news, and eventually got half of the station transferred over it. What makes it my mistake is that I was one of the lieutenants at that station, and And the person, the firefighter who did it was on my shift. And while there was no malintent on it, we worked in a predominantly black neighborhood, so obviously common sense is that's not a very good thing to do. So there was a lot of emotions and that went through, and while he was not my direct employee, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. And what I learned from that is actually from when I read, I got this book, Extreme Ownership, which was written by Jocko Willink and Lee Fab, and two Navy SEALs. I think they have a company, I think it's called like Echelon Front or something like that. They've got a bunch of books, but that book, Extreme Ownership, I always recommend that book in my leadership classes. If you're a student of leadership like I am, that book is really, really good. And it really opened my eyes about a lot of things. And, I started thinking about that whole series of events that happened there and the atmosphere leading up to it. And while I never knew that Axe was ever on the truck, one of the things that really kind of hit me like a sledgehammer to the face is that it was still my fault. And I take responsibility for that whole thing, because as an officer at that station, I am responsible for everything that happens there. And where it's my fault is that I allowed that kind of an atmosphere in the station where anybody would think that would be okay. So while I didn't do it, and had I known about it, I would have immediately had that corrected, and then had a word with my people about that. Hindsight's 20/20, but really evaluating that, there's a lot of soul searching and looking in the mirror. And what did I do that helped create that? And at some point, it was probably a little too lax. I mean, we had a great time at that firehouse. So it was one of the best times I've ever had in my career. And great people, a lot of young guys come in that station because it's one of our busiest. So we get a lot of young guys that are gung-ho, they want to go and do it. It's real easy to get sucked into, just the whole atmosphere and having fun and all that stuff. And sometimes, you as a leader, you kind of have to pull the reins back a little bit on that and just kind of define the lines. And I probably failed to do that. So, which allowed that kind of an event to happen. So, when that happened is pretty much felt like, one of your best friends just died. Half of us got transferred out of there. One of the things that really helped me is I decided not to let that make me become bitter or anything, because when I originally got transferred, yeah, I was taking some responsibility, but not to the level that I do now. So I didn't really, I didn't really think that it was my fault at the time. So instead of being bitter about it, I just decided to, make the best of it and do the best that I could at the new squad that I went to. And there was a lot of personal growth during that time.
How has that event helped you in your position now?
When that happened, I tried to keep everybody positive. That was a morale killer if there ever was one. So it got me thinking about everybody else, not worrying about, woe is me or anything, trying to keep everybody positive, let them know it's going to be okay, tell them, keep everybody focused on the future and bettering themselves, and whatever happens. If we were allowed to ever go back is a different story. But, I read that book. It opened up my eyes about a lot of things of how I used to, I would look at things differently. And I also think that comes with age, obviously. I've always been pretty young. I was hired when I was 21 for a brief period of time there. I think I was the youngest lieutenant in the fire department. But I'd probably been a lieutenant for maybe good 6-7 years when that happened. So it's not like I was a rookie lieutenant or anything. It was a pretty veteran mistake in my opinion. But I always preach that we're going to make mistakes, but you got to learn from it. So I looked in the mirror and what can I do better? The first thing you got to do is take responsibility for your actions or lack thereof, and learn from it, and then try and pass that on and influence the people around you. And that's what I did.
One of the things that I recently thought of that I think could be pretty valuable for new company officers, either in how they approach leadership, but also how they approach being a good follower, is, we all at some point in our careers have to work for somebody that's a micromanager. I think at some point in our career, if we are in a position of leadership, there comes a time where you actually have to be somewhat of a micromanager to particular individuals. Now, I'm not saying that has to endure, but that, to me, that method is reserved for very new, inexperienced people, where you've got to teach them and watch so that they don't, especially in the fire service, they don't hurt themselves or anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you have a great deal of experience and a great deal of knowledge, sometimes more so than the person that is in charge of you, how do you, or how have you dealt with working for micromanagers, and how have you avoided becoming one yourself?
I think to a degree, everybody micromanages stuff. If you're a type A personality, you're definitely one who likes to take control, and people, and I've definitely worked for some people that, like, they want things done their way and there is no other way, and that's, it takes some adjusting to that, but I think the biggest thing is consistency. Working for a micromanager, I think the best thing you can do is keep them informed. Communication is the foundation for anything, let alone leadership. Don't think for 1 second that a senior firefighter can't lead. If their lieutenant's a micromanager, the senior firefighter is just as important, if not, more important, because they're the informal leader of the rest of the crew. And the thing is one of the things that I really grew into and learned from that whole experience was that I realized that even the micromanagers and the incompetent leaders of the world, most of them do not wake up in the morning and say, I can't wait to get to work and be bad at my job. And that was just that thought was kind of an eye-opener for me. So they just don't know, that they are the way they are. That's just who they are, and you have to work around it. Now, if they're not consistent with it, that's a real problem. That's probably the worst kind of leader to work for, is someone who's very inconsistent. But as far as the micromanagers go, the more you keep them informed, the less they'll bother you. You have to gain their trust. So, and I've made that mistake with battalion chiefs, where, I definitely knew more than they did, and they're brand new, and they're trying to establish, their position in the department, and, they go around trying to chop heads off and that's just not the way to do it. But when you're a little bit younger, like I was, you have a tendency to butt heads with them because they're not going to treat my people like that. In the end, I learned that all the fighting that you do in the name of your people ends up hurting your people more, which I found to be very ironic. So as with age that I have learned, and from the best officers I've ever worked for, I always wondered how they were always just very relaxed and nonchalant about things. And I think I'm to that point in my career now where I'm kind of like that. And I think the road to that is you just have to what really is important. We complain in general about little things. We complain about everything. Firefighters complain about everything. But a good leader, in my opinion, is going to focus everybody. When they're all going off the handle, you have to bring everybody back in and say, hey, what's really the problem here? Has anything actually changed? Nothing's changed. Maybe somebody said something, they got their opinions out there and got everybody all mad. But has anything really changed? And does this really bother you? Does it really affect you? Okay, how is this going to affect you running your calls day to day? It doesn't. There's so much stuff that is outside of our control that we let bother us, that we lose sight of what is really important and the stuff that we can do something about anyways. So that's probably one of my best lessons that I've learned in how to deal with that and deal with the micromanagers and stuff, because I definitely did not keep my chief informed, and there was distrust. They're paranoid that you're trying to cut their legs out from underneath them, and that's just not the way to go. And by the time I realized what was happening, and I tried to pull up and change everything, it was too late. The foundation had been laid, the distrust was there, and if you've studied leadership or Lencioni's dysfunctions of a team. Lencioni's got a pyramid that shows communication is the bedrock of everything, but then the very next level is trust. You cannot have a successful team if you don't have trust. And that whole team crumbled there. That was just bad. Since then, I've learned how to do it, and it's a lot easier to gain trust with people if you communicate and just let them know that you know what you're doing and that you have their back. People will follow you if they know that you have their interests and that you have their back. It's that simple.
One of the lessons that I learned regarding leadership, just in the fire service and really on a much more specific scale, is comes from working with special operations, how dynamic some of those scenes can be. And when you're in this decision-making cycle, say a very dynamic situation, a call that you've never ran before, the particular that particular scenario, whether it be a hazardous materials event or a really bad extrication. There's your cookie cutter extrications, but there's so many more complex events. If you've got a vehicle hanging over an embankment or an underride, or you've got a car up underneath a tractor trailer, when you're making those decisions, you're operating off of past experiences, what worked. But something that, and I know that you were one of the people that taught it to me, and Haskett, he was the first one that actually walked me through this this thought process when establishing your decision-making cycle. You're first going to implement an action based on your past experiences, but you've got to have a backup plan if that doesn't work. and then a backup plan to the backup plan, a plan A, B, C, D, E. To me, that is a mindset of there is no failure. There is no mistake that's too big to overcome. There is only action until the job is done. When I applied that to how I think about leadership and just how I approach things, how I've approached my failures, it had a pretty profound effect on me. And I know that a lot of the guys that I've worked with in special operations just have a really sound approach to leadership. Some of the best leaders that I've worked with have come out of special operations. Not to say that I haven't worked with really great leaders that weren't in special operations. Just seems like there's a really high concentration in that group of people. One thing that I wanted to ask you, I know of quite a few of your calls, but you've got extensive experience, and I was wondering if maybe you'd be willing to share, maybe one of your most difficult calls, technically and just personally.
Probably one of the this is a really good this was a really good technical call as far as just trying to get everything square. There's been a couple of them, like, and extrications really stick out of my head. I had one extrication where a vehicle was on its side against a palm tree, and during the rollover, the door opened, the patient's leg came out of the, and then the door closed on the leg, on the ankle, and actually locked. So it is on the driver's side, which the ankle is sticking out, and it was, how do we get this patient out of this vehicle? So that was one of those calls where I went through about 6 different plans because nothing was seeming to work. The original plan was to stick some spreaders in the door, is to stabilize the vehicle with some Paratex and whatnot, and literally spread the door open with the cutters, which would lift the car.
With the cutters or
with the cutters, which would essentially lift the car with the cutters, but spread the door at the same time to be able to get the ankle out. Now, for one reason or another, it wasn't working. So then we went to another plan. And I don't really recall all the steps that we went to. We tried digging underneath. We tried using low pressure airbags to lift the car up in the air so then we could spread the door. And I just remember what eventually worked was we went back to the original plan of spreading the door, and then that worked. So, one of the points that I always, with that story, is that you just always have a backup plan, but never really scrap a plan completely, because something you may have done all along the line might have changed conditions for one of the other previous plans to work. So it still counts as having a backup to the backup to the backup. Other than that, one of the more recent ones that we had a bus, one of those buses that transports people, from parking to the airport. It was a double underride on a semi. I guess there was a car that kind of ran the bus off the road, and the bus hit an SUV, and both the bus and the SUV went underneath a semi that was sitting there at the red light. Fortunately, the person in the SUV actually got out they were injured, but they weren't. It was amazing, because if there was a passenger, they would have been killed. But the driver got out on his own. And then we only had the bus driver, who was heavily entrapped underneath the semi. And in these types of buses, there's no dashboard. It's literally 6 inches of plastic and a windshield and a steering wheel. And so he took a massive hit. And I just remember he was, hanging off the side of the chair, and people were holding him up with a 2x4. And So right off the bat, we had our truck company with us. I told them to set up a low pressure airbag, literally just to put underneath him, so we could support him while me and my crew worked on the other side to cut him out of there, and that was cutting him free out of that thing was exactly like doing surgery. I mean, it was probably one of the most technical extrications I've ever done, where we had a couple spreaders going, and we would I do know that I did spread one area and then left it in place and then put spreaders literally around his foot, and then spread it and cut. And it took us, we actually got him out pretty quick. I think we got him out in about 30 minutes, which for the amount of entrapment that we had on him, it was pretty good. And good experience, good learning, good extrication in general, as far as everybody worked well and the scene went well, and we got him to the hospital. And not only did he end up making it, he was severely hurt, but just recently, this last year, I believe, he finally reached out to us, and we had a nice reunion at the station, and he was able to stand on his own. I mean, his legs were almost completely cut off, and it was really it was emotional. I mean, I got to speak with him when we were doing this, and I think this was 4 years ago, was this extrication, and in that period of time, he had found out that he had a kid that he never even knew about, that he was reunited with, and ended up getting married, and you just hear about the life that people have after. We don't usually ever have that kind of not even closure, but just information or insight on what happens after our calls. We just go from one call to another, and it's never personal. But when you find out, what kind of an effect that you had on a person's life, that makes you feel really, really good.
Yeah.
So that was probably one of the more technical ones that I've ever had.
I recently, actually it was last night, I had Chief Gott on the podcast, recorded last night, and we discussed his time in the fire service. He served 30 plus years, and we talked a little bit about PTSD and that sort of thing. I mean, the cumulative effect of running all these traumatic calls can affect sleep patterns, how we operate on a daily basis. And one of the things that always struck me about you, I mean, you're hardcore, man. There's not too many people that I mean, there's a handful of you guys that work more than anybody else, and you've had some of the most incredible calls that I know of, and I know it's got to affect you, but
Of course,
you carry yourself in such a stoic fashion. I just was wondering how you cope personally, how you keep yourself on an even plane.
I always talked about it with the crews. There's some calls that bother you, like I kind of briefly touched on it earlier in the interview, but one of the calls that I use as an example in my leadership class, just to, I do share, my personal experiences, and good and bad, with the class. I mean, it's a no nonsense, it's real. And I had an extrication where two young girls were broadsided, T-bone on the driver's side door, about 24 inches of intrusion on the driver's side. And I had two different paramedics feel for pulse on the driver, and she had no pulse. Her the other occupant was another her young friend, and she was unconscious, laying on top of the driver. So we had access to her. We got her out, and I had, with the amount of entrapment on her, you know, we had just called her. There was, she was already coded at that point. So after we had done that, I guess, at the time she was 21, so they stuck a monitor, on her, and she had a rhythm because, she has a 21-year-old heart and doesn't really know what happened to her yet. So after command was taken from me by the chief, he decided we're going to cut her out of the car. So myself and another lieutenant, we cut the door off, and as soon as I took a real good look at that door, I was super angry because it was so easy to cut the door off. So we cut the door off, we got her out in probably about 90 seconds. We worked her, but I didn't know her neck ended up being broken, and I had no idea her neck was broken, like, badly, for like 10 years. So, and I never knew at that time, and all I know is that while I know I made the right decision as far as there was nothing that we were going to do that was going to save her life, the fact of the matter is that I didn't try. At that time, my sister was 21 years old, and when you start reflecting on things like that, you're like, if that's my sister in that car, I would have wanted them to try, and I didn't do it, and that was a massive failure on my part, and that hurt for a long, long time, weeks. I struggled with that one. Just I wanted to convince myself that I made the right decision, but it didn't feel like it. We talk about stress, and there isn't any class that you're ever going to take that's going to tell you how to deal with making decisions, when people, live and die and stuff. So, and I still get emotional when I talk about that, especially in front of the class. But then just, within the last year or two, my one fireman who was actually in the back seat with her, so her neck was broken very badly, and that there's nothing that we were going to do. So I'm like, well, I was like, still doesn't make it feel any better, still didn't try. But the thing, like I said earlier, is I've learned from that. I learned from it that minute, and never again will I never try, or not try. But those things stay with you, and yeah, and I've seen a whole lot of stuff. I've been very fortunate that I haven't seen a whole lot of pediatric death. So, that helps tremendously. But at some point, that you're kind of screwed up in the head a little bit. So my recommendation is just, if it gets to a point where you're having a real hard time with it, you got to talk about it with somebody. While sometimes I don't really go crazy, or feel like I need to talk about a whole lot of stuff. There's stuff if I see a movie or something, I start getting choked up, then, I'll just allow myself to just let that pressure go. I don't like letting it build up. But some people also, they want to, if they can't handle it, they need to go talk to somebody. Doesn't make you weak or anything. You need to go and talk to somebody professional.
How would you approach it as a company officer, or what recommendation would you give company officers or other battalion chiefs? So I know the process with Orange County, but if you are incident command of a call that is very traumatic and you can see that it affects the crew, how do you approach that with the people on the scene?
The first thing that you have to be able to do is take in the whole scene. You need to stand back. Sometimes it's a conscious decision. It's a conscious effort that you have to do. You step back from it. You look at everything. You look at how you pay attention to how people are reacting. What kind of a, are they working on? Are they working hard? Who's in the middle of, who's dealing with the patient or the really bad part? And then, I want my officers to know their people. So there have been several calls where I've had newer people, in the middle, sitting in a car full of blood, and, they're just splattered everywhere. And, I go up to the officers and I'm like, I need you to kind of just keep an eye on this person. If they say anything, um, depending on the level of trauma, and emotionally, I may just not even, I'll just, if I even hear any kind of comment that says something that there might not be something right, I'll automatically call for our critical, debriefing team, and then sometimes you just have to take matters into your own hands just because we're going to try and be tough. We don't want to be seen as weak. We actually had one of my crews several months ago shot at. They did a well-being check, which everybody in the country goes to these things all the time. And it was just a perfect storm. The daughter was there, says she knows her mother is there. She's got a big medical history. The door's locked, her phone's not on, and you have my permission to go in and check on her. So they looked around and they were able to climb in through a window. And the lady is there. She has her phone off. She's pretty much deaf, does not have her hearing aids in, and she has a gun. And all she sees is two young guys standing in her house, which, by the way, is in the middle of a very bad neighborhood. So she actually fired 3 shots at them and actually held our brand new, had like a week on the job Proby at gunpoint for a couple seconds. Fortunately, she had to go plug her phone and turn her phone on to go call 911 that they've got home invaders, and he was able to dive out the window. So we are really, really lucky on that one. And, none of them wanted to go home. And I'm like, well, that's not your call. I was like, you guys are going home, because I know that your head's not going to be in the game. You think it's going to be fine, but what's going to happen is you're going to sit there and start thinking when you're sitting by yourself. And then, that's where it really starts to sink in, so you don't even let your people, don't put it in their plate to decide for them. If you think for 1 second that their head's not going to be in the game, they're a liability now. And the chances of them getting hurt increase dramatically. So our job as a chief or a lieutenant is to make sure that our people go home every single day. And if there's anything that's going to possibly put that in jeopardy, then you need to make a decision and get them help or relieve them of duty.
That's awesome. I was not aware of that incident. That's pretty intense.
Yeah. I had no idea why I was dispatched to that call. No clue whatsoever. And then when I realized what was going on, obviously that's a sledgehammer to the face.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just recalling some of the calls that I've been on, and never been shot at.
Yeah. I've been shot at, but not at that close.
Been on some pretty sketchy scenes, guns and all that, and nobody's ever shot at me. Thank God.
Well, I can't imagine being a brand new firefighter with a week on the department. Well, at least out in the field. It's week or two. It was his first or second week in the field. And to have a gun pointed at you from 5 feet.
Yeah.
It's very scary.
Good thing she wasn't a good shot.
Yes. She was mostly blind too.
Can you think of anything that you would like to share with whoever's listening that could help them in their career, whether it's fire service, law enforcement, or in the private sector, just regarding leadership or, personal leadership, self-leadership?
I would say if you want the respect of your people and you want to be a good leader, be honest, be consistent, and let your people work for you. Let when I say that, don't be that micromanager. Have a goal in mind and figure out what is the end result. Okay, what is the goal of what we're doing here, and hand that goal to your officers and let them do their job and work for you. If you sit there and tell everybody how to do everything, you're just doing it your way. But the amount of creativity and intelligence and ingenuity that your people can come up with that you would have never thought of, will just, not only will it make the call go better, it's not about making you look good. It's about the people that we're serving, and it's about preparing your people. Anytime, my crews did a good job, and they give me accolades because I'm the officer, I'm like, it's not me, it's them. Okay, never take that. Always give it to them. And anytime, they're getting criticized or they're getting blamed for something, you take it away from them. Okay, it should be a burden to be an officer, not having them, not you're in charge of them. It should be a burden, and you do everything in your power to take care of your people. Okay, at the same time, you have to be fair. So, and when I say being fair, when we make our mistakes, you hold your people accountable for it as well as yourself. Otherwise we're not going to learn anything. It's kind of like half the problems we have going on with society right now is that whole everybody gets a trophy concept. It doesn't really work that well. It means more to people when you earn something. You personally grow more if you make mistakes and learn from them. And the only way you're going to do that is by taking accountability for your actions. So while our job is there to protect them, it's also there to make them grow. And sometimes you have to make unpopular decisions, and hold your people accountable. And they may not be happy about it, immediately, but I think later on down the road, as like your children do, they kind of grow and respect you for it and understand why you had to do what you have to do. But you just have, if you have heart and you care about them, you can't BS your way through that. People will see through it. And if you do that, I think you're going to be just fine.
I've found that to be effective, it's not a matter of acting like you care. You have to genuinely care about your people.
Right.
And you have to get to know them, which goes back to your point about communication. The only way to get to know your people is to talk to them, but listen more than you actually talk,
Right.
And I really appreciate you letting me interview you. This was really good conversation.
No problem.
I also, your book recommendation, Extreme Ownership, on my website, I have a reading list. I update it regularly, so I'm continuously reading, and I get people recommending books, but that book is on the reading list.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. And they wrote The Dichotomy of Leadership. That's on the list as well. Yeah, if you don't mind, take a look at that reading list and see if you've got anything that you'd like to add to it.
Yeah, we'll do.
All right, cool, man. Well, again, thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of From Embers to Excellence. Please visit hallenbachleadership.com for additional content. Dave's goal is to add value to as many people as possible. So if he can be of any assistance to you or someone you know, please connect with him via email or on one of his social media accounts, linked on the homepage of his website. Remember, our failures don't define us unless we let them. And the only true measure of a leader is the success of their team.